on this computer. This demonstration is going to show you guys how to set up your cameras and how to create a Playblast for layout purposes. So this file that I've opened, I've called it sc1_0102 because I'm going to have two cameras in this scene. And I just applied this checkerboard texture because I couldn't find the other one. I didn't put it in the right folder. So just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just using this texture map instead of the actual vinyl texture map. Also, you can see that I have a layer for the characters, and you all might have individual layers for your characters, whatever's going to help you organize better. A board layer, and then I created a new layer called cons. And I probably need another layer called cameras. So I should probably select these two cameras, or maybe individually turn them off and on, but I'm going to hit this create a new layer and assign selected. So now the cameras will turn off and on. So I'm going to call this cameras, LYR. Oops. Maybe I'll call it cams. Okay. So for now, I'm not going to look at the cameras. So I just turned those off. You can see that my layer for the board is restricted. If I try to select the board, I can't, because if I want to select these control handles that I have created, I don't want to accidentally select the board. You can see that now I've accidentally selected the board, and I don't want that. So I leave it restricted. And then the characters also, I can select them, but I do not want to select them. Remember, when we animate, we're not animating the objects, we're animating the control handles. This is a really important concept. So they're parented, each one of these characters is parented to its corresponding control handle. So I'm going to restrict the layer. It's not just a pawn layer, but it's, I guess I should call it characters layer or something, geo layer. This is probably a better name, is geo layer. And I'll just change my board layer so it just matches. I just try to be consistent with my naming. Okay. So again, these are restricted, so I don't accidentally select them. And the ones that I do want to select are the control handles. So if I make a marquee around everything, it looks like I've selected the characters. But again, I haven't selected the characters. It's just that the characters highlight because the control handles they're parented to are selected. But if I go to the, real quickly, if I go to the hypergraph, where we're doing our rigging, you can see that I haven't selected anything but the control handles. In fact, I've only selected a couple. I need to go through and select all the control handles. But anyways, so I select my controls, and I put my my countdown here. Oh, actually, before I do that, so just for the sake of setting up our Playblast, I want you guys to set up your camera a certain way. So to get this frame number down here, you go to display, heads up display, and then it's called current frame. You can see if I turn it off, it goes away. So display, heads up display, current frame, and it turns back on. And this is really important because this is going to help me determine how many frames I need once I bring this shot into Premiere or After Effects or whatever. When I make when I update my my project, my thesis project, these numbers will tell my professor or my fellow students, you know, if they want me to work on something at frame 1101, they know that because they can see the numbers here. If you don't turn this on, they're just kind of guessing. So it's very important to turn on your frame count. Also, the perspective well, I'm not going to be shooting from the perspective. I'm going to create a camera, but you also want to have the names of your camera turned on. So display, heads up display, and it's probably turned on by default, but it's just camera names. You can see I turned it off, but I want it turned on, so I'm going to turn it on. Camera names. All right, so I'm not going to need a whole lot of space for this. I'm only going to animate from 100 to 200 for the first camera. So if I go back here, oops, I got to drag this back to 200. Change these to 200. There we go. So the first thing I want you to do, and again, I want it to be very clear that I'm at frame 100. I'm going to select everything, all my control handles. You can see I've already keyed them because there's a red bar in the channel box, and there's also a red tick mark down here in the time slider. And I'm going to show you a third method of keeping track of your keys, and that's the graph editor. So I'm going to go to Panels, Layouts, 3 panes, split top. So I'm going to leave this as my perspective. I'm going to leave this right now as hypergraph because I'm going to create a new camera for this. But this is the graph editor. So to find the graph editor, you go to Panels, Panel, and then Graph Editor. And it's already here, so it's not going to change. But in the graph editor, you can see that I've keyed, you see these orange tick marks, or they're not tick marks, these are tick marks, but these are little dots, these little orange dots. Those represent places where I've keyed my characters. And you can see as I move forward in the timeline, the character moves also. And the way I'm moving forward from one to the other is I'm hitting the greater than sign. So you guys haven't done this, so I'm going to delete my animation on these characters. I'm going to select all this stuff. Actually, I'm going to delete everything after 100 because I wanted you guys to at least key 100. Okay, so you can see there's no more animation there, but I still have, there's no more movement, but they're still keyed at frame 100. While I'm thinking about it, I want you guys to go to the far right, the bottom far right of your computer, and you'll see this button. It looks like a loop, circle with mine is red right now. This is what it looks like when it's turned off. This is called the auto keyframe toggle, and you want to have that checked on. I'll show you why in a second. So turn that one on, and then go to the one right next to it, which is your animation preferences. So I click on that, and it should open up like this. If it doesn't open like mine just did, you might need to expand it so you can scroll down or whatever. But what we're looking for in here is the playback speed. That needs to be 24 frames per second times 1. We may play with it at different speeds to see what it looks like if you slow it down or speed it up, but this is where we're animating it, 24 frames per second times 1. Also, this update view, you want this set to all. And what that does is, once I have my camera created, if I just hit play over here, and I have this set to active, whichever view my mouse is hovered in, it's going to play the animation live in there, but it's not from the other. So we want to see them from both, excuse me, from both cameras. So set that to all. I don't remember if we've done this, but just in case we haven't, then go to settings, animation. I'm sorry, that's where we are. Go to undo, settings, undo. Make sure your undo is turned on and your Q for undo is set to infinite. So what that does is as soon as you open a Maya file, it's going to remember all of your commands. If you have this set to on and set to infinite. So let's say you got 20 steps into your animation or something and you forgot something, you really wanted to change it. So you start hitting Control Z, Control Z. If this is set to finite, more likely than not, it's going to not let you go all the way to the frame that you are the command that you wanted to. And that's happened to me. So the important thing is to set it to on and infinite. Also, let's see, animation. Yes. So then go to animation under settings. And where it says non-weighted tangent under tangents, you want yeah, default tangent weight to be non-weight tangents, and then default in tangent, set that to clamped. Default out tangent, set that to stepped. And I believe that's all we need in here. So we'll go ahead and save that, save those changes. And also, if you haven't noticed, the controls that have animation on them, they turn into these parallelograms. If there's no animation on a control or on one of these nodes, it's just a rectangular box. But as soon as you've put any kind of animation, you've set animation on it, you can see that all these have, they also highlight, well, they're highlighted because I have them selected. If I deselect them, they go back to gray. But if I select them, they highlight yellow. But right now, the important thing is that they're also parallelograms. Okay, so to set up a camera, because we don't want to animate to the perspective view, you immediately want to start thinking of what's the best shot to tell your story. Where should your camera be to tell your story? So again, I picked this scene because it already has all the characters. It pretty much, let's say my story is about a battle on the chessboard. So I need to set up my camera in a way that's going to establish this as my first shot. So I'm going to go to create cameras and just pick the first camera. There's more advanced cameras with aims and aim and up. You don't need all that stuff. Just use camera, the simple one. And you can see it drops it right in the middle of the scene. So I can hit W, oops, hit W. And I can move this camera around here. But what's more useful is I want to position this camera. So, but I want to see what the camera's seeing. So if I have this camera selected, I go to panels, look through selected. You can see this is what the camera is actually looking at. It's looking, the camera's way down here looking at the pawn's feet. So again, I can move this around, and you can see as I pull it up and around and rotate it, it updates in my camera view. But another way you can update this is if you actually move the camera, the selected camera, in your new view. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag out with my right mouse button. And then I'm going to drag around in my left mouse button and hold so I'm holding Alt through all these commands, but I'm also holding down the middle mouse button as the third mouse essentially. So, and I don't remember exactly where I set up my camera. I'm going to turn on my cameras for a second since I've already done this. And this is one I have selected. This is one I created yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, this new one. So here's my, and you can see it's already assigned as this view is assigned to look through this camera selection. So look through selected, you can see that doesn't change. So from frame 100, I've already determined, and you all might need music or you might need to think this through a little bit better, but how long does your camera need to last? How long are you going to show this camera? Is it going to be moving? Is it going to be tilted on an angle? And for a lot of us, it's kind of, even though we're in animation, it's kind of hard to think of frames per second. So I like to think of seconds instead of frames per second. So how many frames are there in a second in most traditional animations or the Disney animations from the past?
Isn't it 24?
Yeah, 24 frames per second. And 24 frames per second is really similar to 25 frames per second. It's just one more frame. So when I think about the timeline and how long I'm going to hold a camera or hold a character's movement or something, I think in 25s, 25 or 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, 125. It's just a very simple way to work, and it's very, very close to 24 frames a second. So if I have 100 frames, and you can see I've changed this timeline from 100 to 200, how many seconds is that? Or close to how many seconds is that? So what's 200 minus 100? It's 100, right? divided by 25.
About 4
4.
seconds.
So yeah, 100 frames of animation is more or less 100. I'm sorry, it is more or less 4 frames, 4 seconds. Sorry. So let me. So I've positioned my camera. The other thing that I wanted to show you about the camera, and I'm going to get back to the seconds and all that stuff, but I've locked the camera. So here's my camera. And it's very easy to confuse your cameras, especially if you haven't named them, because you can create a new camera and it's called perspective 1, and you think that that's your regular perspective view. So you start moving it around and trying to position your character so you can animate it, and then you realize, oh no, I moved my camera. I didn't move my perspective around. So I meant to be over here, you know, orbiting around so I can grab my character better or whatever, but I accidentally moved my camera that I liked. But all is not lost. Next to your P, if you guys look on your keyboard, there's a left bracket right next to your P. If you hit the left bracket in your camera view that you liked, it remembers the different positions that your camera is in. So that's I believe that's where I left it off. That's where I started it from. And it's probably not the best camera. As you can see, it's kind of creating a there's not enough negative space. So I'm going to drag it out just a little bit, and that's a little bit better. Maybe I'll raise it a little bit more, something like that. So let's say I'm happy with this camera. I have the attributes selected, not the numbers, but the attributes selected for this camera 1, or 1_01. I right click and I say lock selected. Now I can't accidentally move it like I did earlier. And then if I need to change it, I just unlock it, right click and say unlock selected right there. All right, so that's my camera. So this is, and for most animations, the very first shot is your establishing shot. So I'm showing the whole scene. I'm giving the audience, I need to give them enough time to understand that animation is going to be about this team versus this team fighting it out on the chessboard. So this is my establishing shot. And I deleted my animation on the characters that I had already done, but let me turn off my cameras for a second. And I need to go ahead and reselect not my pieces, but my control handles. And I'm going to, I already keyed everything at 100. So to key everything, I hit S. S in Maya stands for set key. So I just set a key. So if I were to select any one of these, you can see they're in the channel box, all their attributes have a red bar in front of them, each one of them. If I select nothing and then I select this guy, each one has a red bar. So anything that you're going to animate, you need to set it at 100. And for what you guys are doing, this may seem a little overkill because these are super simple characters, but I want you to get in the habit of setting a safety frame for yourself, especially thinking about moving forward eventually with fully rigged human characters with all these fingers and toes and facial expressions. If you get lost in your rig, you can just go to your safety frame that has your character in the default position and just copy that, and you can get back to working a lot faster. So I keyed everything at 100. I'm gonna hold down the Alt button and I hit the greater than sign, which is 2 keys to the right of M as in Mary. So I just held down the Alt button and hit the greater than sign once, and that took me to frame 101. If I hold down Alt and keep hitting the greater than sign, you can see that takes me frame by frame to every frame. Sometimes that's useful, but I'll show you a more useful way to get from keyframes to keyframes in a second. The other thing is, if I was out here, I can also go the other direction by holding Alt and then hitting the less than sign, which is right next to the M. So those are very useful for working in the time slider, or I'm sorry, the timeline. So I'm going to reselect everything in my perspective view. excuse me, and you can animate from the camera view, but you want to think of your perspective view as your working view, where you can move around and position your character, and your camera view as your camera view, and not so much your working view. So I don't need to grab my control handles from the camera view, and I don't want them to be a distraction. So I'm going to turn off my NURBS curves in this view. So if I hit 4, you can see that those NURBS curves are gone. The controls are gone. 5, we get shaders. 6, we get textures. All right, so going back here in my perspective view, I select everything. I already keyed at 100. I'm gonna hold down Alt and hit the greater than sign just once. That takes us to frame 101. So 101 for everybody is gonna be the first place you start animating. That's gonna be your first frame of your layout shot. So I'm gonna hit S, and you can see there's something else down here. Well, actually there's not. What we're looking at is frame 100 and frame 101. So now that I've keyed at 101, I don't want to show my audience frame 100. And with these characters, it's not a big deal because they don't even have arms or faces or legs or anything. But far too often students, when they're showing Playblasts, they show their characters out in the T pose, and then all of a sudden it pops to the next pose. So you don't want to show frame 100. You don't want to show your safety frame to your audience. So just change this at the bottom to frame 101. That way your audience never has to see your character in the T pose. So this is where your animation actually starts at frame 101. And then how long are we going to hold it? It depends what story we're telling. But one thing I do want to make sure that everyone does, before you get into animating your camera too much or your characters, give your audience at least a second to absorb what this movie is about, what this animation is about. So when I say absorb, what am I referring to?
Like an establishing shot?
Yeah, generally it could be an establishing shot, especially for your first shot. But when I say absorb, I'm more specifically talking about giving them an opportunity to understand what's happening. If I started my animation right at frame 101 and the characters are already moving, it's like a jump cut. They don't understand what's going on. And then at the end, the same thing. If I don't give them enough time to at the end to understand what happened, then I'm cutting on a shot. So I'm going to say from frame 101 to frame 125, I'm going to have everything just stay still. So all these characters that I have them selected, I'm going to hit S. So you can see, even though I've keyed them at 101, or keyed them at 100 for a safety frame, 101 to start the animation, all the way to frame 125, nobody's moving. And then the first guy, so it's White's turn to move. At frame, I'm going to start at frame 125. So there is a little bit of math to animating. It's just about, I mean, certainly here's some math in here for your channel box, but it's just really counting. It's not, we're not getting into trigonometry or algebra or anything like that. But let's say from 125 to, let's say it takes him a second. We want to get him from from wherever he's at, this little gray box to this red box is number 1 box. We want it to take about a second for him to hop or slide or whatever he's going to do to get there. So, and again, I don't want to think 24 frames per second. I'm just thinking 25 frames a second, even though we're actually animating to 24. So I'm just going to add 125 plus 25, and that gets us to frame 150. So this is where I want him to be, or this is where I actually wanted to move out to. So if I pull him out here, that's his first movement. And then I would go to the next guy. So he's going to be confronted by the opponent, the opposition force. So I need to key this guy also at 150. And then he's going to take a second to get out there also. So at 160, I'm sorry, not 160, a second. So 150 plus 25 is 175. So sorry, let me do that again. So 175, here's 175. I'm going to drag him forward. So he's going to go to frame 2. Uh-oh, what happened? What happened to my first guy? I thought I keyed him so he could move forward. So now nobody's moving. Even though I have these guys set. Let's go back here. If I select this first one, I do have him keyed at 125, but I turned off this auto keyframe toggle. And these are super simple characters. And of course I did that on purpose because I'm showing you guys. But I've done this where I've posed out. I took the time, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes to pose out a character all the way down to his fingers. And I loved the pose and I was all ready to go. And then I went to frame 150 and I was ready to go to the next pose. And I dragged it out there. And as soon as I did that, I lost everything that I had done. And because the reason that happened was I didn't have this auto keyframe toggle turned on. So any movement you make to any one of these controls, I pull this guy up. If the auto keyframe toggle is on, you can see it automatically keys that. This is where he was before I moved him. If I pull him forward, you can see it keys it in the blue to translate Z. Or if I pull it up, you can see it adds another one in the translate Y. Or this one to the left. You can see now he's moving in all 3 translations. So your auto keyframe toggle is going to save you a lot of time. So just get in the habit of just leaving it on. Anyway, so back to our animation. So I moved this guy out to frame. So at 150, he moves out to here. Oh, I need to turn it back on. All right, so I'm going to turn it on. And then I drag him forward. As soon as I drag him forward, you can see in the graph editor, it immediately drops this little blue line with the little dots. Also, you should see that from 125 to 150, he pops there, and this doesn't seem like very good animation, but this is what we call blocking, and it's really, really important for you guys to get used to seeing your characters move in blocking like this, where all of a sudden they just pop, because the more levels of detail we add, the more layers of animation we add, the smoother and smoother this is going to get. Too often students will go right into, like if I just select the translate Z here, and they don't like to see the character just pop from 149 to 150. That's a big jump. So they just take these 2 guys and they'll put it in spline. Oh, that's a lot better. The problem is, especially with a human character, this becomes very, very floaty. So I don't want you guys working this way. Eventually we will start to use some of these spline controls, but more importantly, I want you guys getting used to using, seeing your characters pop from one frame to the next. And we'll figure out with the timing and all that, how that works. So this guy moves out to 150. Then his opponent at 150, we already keyed him at 150. At 175, he's going to confront this guy. So maybe he's going to step right up to the line. And I have my auto keyframe toggle on. Here's my little dot that it created. So 175 to 200. Again, I want to give my audience enough time to register what's happening here. So if I just, let's just say I've keyed those and I'm happy. So I'm going to create what's called a Playblast from this. So my animations are from frame 101 to frame 200. And I don't have the controls. Again, I clicked on the camera view. Here's my camera view. Here's my perspective view. My perspective view has my control handles. It may have other stuff if I want my little axis icon or whatever. But I'm not going to create a Playblast from perspective. I have to create a camera, and I've already done that. So with my camera created, yeah, also the perspective view very often shows your cameras as well. You can turn it off and on, whatever. But so here's my first camera, and you can see it's camera 1_01. Another thing I want to make sure that you don't do is have one of your controls selected, because you can see as I make this Playblast, that character is always going to be highlighted green, and it's just distracting. That's not even the character that's moving. So just deselect your characters so that we actually see your animation happening, or your layout, whatever. So to make a Playblast, you right click on this timeline and you say Playblast options. And ornaments are like this stuff, frame count and your cam number. Ideally, I'd have you guys use movie files instead of AVIs, and encoding in HP26, or I'm not HP, what is it? H.264. That's a good compressor, but I don't have that set up on my my computer. So AVI works fine for now. We'll leave quality at 70, scale at 0.5 from the window. So the important thing down here is save to file. Make sure this is checked on, and you'll say browse. And as I open this browse, notice, okay, this is my thesis folder, because I was looking at it earlier, but the important thing is it's putting it in the movies folder. So I need to change this. I don't want this to drop into my thesis project. I need to select from the current project here. I have, a couple of different options, but I want to go to primitive theater, movies, and this is where it needs to be created. And you can see I've already created it here as cam1 _ 01. But I'm just going to select that name and save as, or just save it. And it's going to ask me if I want to replace it. I say yes. And then Playblast. And do I want to overwrite? I say yes. So it just takes a little bit of time, and it'll pop out this rough movie. And I call it rough because you can see it's pixelated. You can get really smooth animation out of Playblast, but it's not lit, and the resolution's bad. This isn't about beautiful quality of a rendering. These Playblasts are very useful because they can, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the traditional side of it, but in the history of animation, the old Disney guys, they used to do what were called pencil tests. So they would do, they'd sketch out their ideas, and they do a quick film of them, and then they put them in the projector and they show them to people, and they get feedback. So it's a really quick way to get feedback. And this is so much easier. We're not having to draw every frame. We're just animating and then just creating a Playblast. But again, the important thing for you guys to remember is this is dropping it into not my thesis project, but my primitive theater folder, movies. And then this is the one that I just saved on top of. So if we watch this, there's the first one, there's a second one. So I gave my audience enough time to, maybe it won't take them a second, I don't know, but you need to give them at least, I would say, start with 25 frames or 24 frames of pause, just to help them understand the scene. And then your action happens, and then give them a little bit of time at the end to understand, before the next shot comes in, what's going on. So that's the first scene. And then I made a second camera, and I'll turn my cameras on again. And I'm not going to reposition this one. You're going to create it the same way. You go to create, cameras, camera. But I've already named this one. You can see I named this one cam1 _ 02. So the 1 stands for the scene, and the 2 stands for the camera number. So this is scene 2, and you can see that I'm going to zoom in here in a second. I say look through selected. So I'm no longer in camera 1. You can see it updated to camera 2, and I zoomed in here. Maybe I want this for tension. Maybe it's even closer, or maybe it starts out wide, and then I pull in to build tension because these guys are about to fight or something. So the other thing is down here, my timeline is still set up for camera 1. I animated from 101 to 200. Now I need to switch this to 201. And let's say I'm just going to do it just for the sake of ease. I'm just going to animate another 100 frames. So 300. So 201 to 300. I'm pulling in. So I'm trying to build some tension for the audience. So I'm not even having these guys move. I'm just pulling the camera in. So to do that, let's say if you actually wanted to do that, In fact, yeah, let me just do it for you so you understand how to do this if you want to do something like this. So first I pose my camera out at frame 201. There's no animation there. If I go to the graph editor, you can see only at 201 is stuff keyed, but I want this to be moving slowly all the way through to frame 100. I'm sorry, it's from 300. So I'm gonna go down to 300 and I'm gonna drag the camera forward. And you can see their heads are clipped off. I'm not too concerned about their feet at this point, but I want to make sure that their heads aren't chopped off. So I'm gonna drag it up and probably move it forward just a little bit more. Okay, so now my camera is set up, but if I just drag through here, oh, actually it's still set up. I moved in the, I know I moved in the translate Z. Let's see. You can see that number change from 0.006 to 0.316, and then the other ones also changed. So working in the graph editor, if I wanted to compress this so I could see a little bit better, I'll show you a couple of tools. First, like I said, you can use the greater than, less than sign to go from one keyframe to the next, or you can hold down the Alt button and hit the greater than or less than sign to go every single frame backwards or forwards. That's just the Alt buttons. I'm sorry, just the greater than, less than sign. And I do this all the time because I'm just looking at two different frames. Also, to work in here, you can hold down the Alt and the Shift at the same time. And then holding down your right mouse button, you can drag it left or right. And this expands and contracts your graph editor, so it's easier to see. Sometimes the graph looks just like it's straight lines, but when you zoom in, you can see that there's some curvature. So that's important to be able to compress it or decompress it. Let's see. So that's the camera that I've. Oh, yeah. So here's my Translate Z, and you can see when I zoomed in, I didn't just have a stepped tangent. And I'll repeat this. For the characters, you want blocking, you want them in stepped, but for your cameras, you want to try to get as accurately as you can. So you can see there's a little bit of a hiccup there because I moved it in all three translations. So I'm going to change Translate Z back to a linear tangent, which is this one right here. And that straight line means that it's moving at a constant speed. It's not slowing down, or it's not starting out slowly and then picking up speed and then slowing down again to the end. It's just a constant speed. So that's constant velocity. See, translate Y. Yeah, I think I did it to all three of them. I just made it a linear tangent. All right, so going back to 201, if I hit play, you can see I'm trying to build tension between the characters. Maybe the next shot, maybe they would be leaning even closer to each other. Maybe it's just their heads and this guy's closed in even closer or something. I don't know. But I'm not gonna make more shots. I just want to show you guys how to set up your cameras. Some of the easy tools to use, a linear tangent probably for now. Your characters, you'll animate them very simply using stepped, where they just kind of pop from one position to the other. And then, oh, let me I'm gonna Playblast camera 2. So right click, go to Playblast options. And it's already dropping it. You can see it's dropped it in the Primitive Theater movies folder. But this is number 2. So I'm gonna say actually I can just do it here. I can just delete that last one and replace it with a 2. And either I can say Playblast or just hit enter. Actually, yeah, I gotta hit enter to accept it. And then I say Playblast, and I want to override it. So I say, okay. There you go. So those are my 2 shots that I've done. So even without before you really know you know, how you want to move the characters so much. This is what this is for. It's to help you figure out how far they need to move, what the camera needs to be doing to tell your story. Um, I mean, if you wanted to include props in this, that'd be great too, but it's really important to understand where your characters are going, why are they there, and that's what the camera does for you. It's basically like another character that's telling your story. I believe that's all that I wanted to cover. Do you guys have any questions about creating a layout, starting your layout for your animation scenes? Either creating a Playblast or working in the graph editor or, animating your poses. Because I realized I covered a lot of new stuff for you guys today. You guys are good? No questions?
Yeah, this stuff on its own doesn't seem super complicated. I just need to catch myself back up.
Yeah, it really isn't very hard. It's just a matter of, I think more than anything, what I expect that students will probably get hung up on is not starting their animation at frame 101. As many times as I say it, most students start at 0 or frame 1. And in the industry, first, when I was at Ringling, they had us animating starting at frame 101, and I didn't know why. And then I got to Real Effects, and it was the same thing. They had us start our animations at frame 101. I don't know if it's because they want more than just one safety frame. Maybe they want 100 safety frames. If you wanted to build stuff in, you could build it at the beginning here, and that gives you plenty of, it gives you 4 seconds of animation. But regardless of why, the important thing is this is what the industry does. At least when I was working in it, they may have changed something. I don't know. But for now, just get used to starting your first animation at frame 101. And then, of course, labeling your camera correctly so you can easily identify which that is. You don't want to accidentally animate to camera 1 when you meant to animate to camera 2, because that's going to change things up. Any other comments or thoughts? Does it seem pretty straightforward for you guys? All right, so what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to give you guys class time, and if you need, just ask me and I'll help you guys out with whatever, even if it's UVs to help you guys get that done. But everyone needs to create that SC1_01 file, and you can see that mine is called SC1_01_02 because I have camera 1 and camera 2 in here. If I had camera 3 in here, then I would add _03 just to be consistent. It looks like there's some comments. I need to step away for a few. Yeah, so I'm recording this for anyone that needed to review it.
Okay, and then small question.
You have a question?
Yeah,
Charles?
so every single one of our assets needs to have a texture on it, not just an image, correct?
No.
Before it should proceed, right? No, okay.
Not necessarily. So again, I'm calling this primitive theater because I don't want you guys to have to really work harder than you absolutely need to. I need everyone to UV unwrap at least one pawn and then texture that pawn to show that you understand how the proper way to UV unwrap. But if you have I don't know, just a primitive shape, like if you're just using a box for I don't know, like a table or something, you don't have to unwrap that and create a texture for it. You can if you want to, but just to keep things simple, you could just create a shader for it and then turn that shader orange or.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought you said
Yeah.
you wanted like an actual image on it. I know we didn't have to unwrap anything else, but I thought you still wanted like an actual image. But yeah, that works for me. If I could just
No, as long as you
attribute on it.
show that you've unwrapped one character, one pawn, that's because
Yeah,
that's fair for everyone, because you all have different stories and different amounts of work. So I just want to keep the grading as simple and fair as possible.
Yeah, I've already uploaded my pawn and everything to the drive, so I should be good.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? All right, so I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm also going to stop the video, and I'm going to leave. In fact, Charles, do you mind if I make you the host while I'm gone? Because I'm going to end this video so that I can actually, so it'll start processing.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so.